What is up, YouTube? This is Badass Motor Prussia back in my structure testing world. Now, there are actually a few things in this world that I'd like to do videos on in the future, but today I thought that I would do a follow-up video for anybody that watched my previous video, which was a villager breeder design, infinite automated villager breeder, as you can see here. Now, this was my first design. It was also my first video that I ever put out on YouTube that was intended for other people. So, that being said, I put it out about 2 weeks ago, I think, and so far I've actually learned quite a lot about the mechanics of how this will work. And I thought that I would do a little update to optimize it, and for anybody that did follow this, just share some of what I've learned and how I can make this better. Now, I did put this in a creative world, and it does work. I also put this in my survival world, and again, it does work. But the survival world obviously has different conditions that need to be met, and that is primarily why I am doing this video. Now, as you can see, this does work. That is an adult village. Oh, I broke one of the blocks earlier, so he just squeezed through. Now, the first thing I want to mention is, as you can see, a lot of these crops have broken. Now, the reason for that is, while these crops are hydrated enough to actually be able to plant carrots and grow on top of them, and my farmers will in fact harvest them and replant, the issue is I have my water source 1 block below my tilled soil. Now, I didn't really understand farmland hydration mechanics when I first built this, so as a little follow-up, as you can see here, if I were to move my water source, if I have a water source on a level field with all of my tilled soil, you'll notice all of this will get hydrated. Now, you'll also notice that 1, 2, 3, 4 in each of the cardinal directions will be hydrated. Now, also you will notice that 1, 2, 3, 4 in the diagonal will be hydrated, all of this by this one little source block, and then all of the blocks in between this diagonal and this cardinal direction will also be hydrated in this one large square. Now, the way I have it up here is with my my water source blocks underneath of my farm plot, it does make physical contact with the farm plot, and therefore you can grow, but as soon as these are removed, it has a chance to revert back into regular dirt if crops are not planted fast enough. See, my farmer will plant them, generally speaking, fast enough, but not always. So there's a chance that this will revert back into dirt. Obviously, your farmers cannot till land on their own, so you will have to come back in here and till the land yourself. And if he doesn't plant crops fast enough, they will break and revert. Now, this works fine. These will not revert, even if crops are not placed for a substantial amount of time because they are properly hydrated. You will also notice that if I were to move my water source up one to here, now you'll see, well, these diagonals are still hydrated, these cardinal directions still hydrated, but you'll also notice the tiles below them are also still hydrated in the same direction. So the 4 cardinal directions and the diagonals on the ground level below my water source are hydrated, and all of the cardinal directions and the diagonals on level with this water source are also going to be hydrated. So that is one of the primary changes to my farm, but the primary reason I'm making this video is to revamp the dispensing system. Now, as you can see, I'm in a creative world. I have mobs spawning off. In survival, tons of mobs all over the place, huge problem. Now, in this system, what's going to happen is, for anybody who hasn't watched the previous video, I won't do an elaborate explanation of this. If you really want to know how this works in detail, go watch the previous video, and then come to this for the upgraded version. Now, what's going to happen is your mobs are going to filter into this area. They're going to trigger this tripwire as they fall down. Then this block will move underneath of them so they do not fall in the lava. This dispenser will activate, dispensing a minecart onto this rail, and then this piston will force the villager into the minecart and push them out. So what's going to happen is your villager is going to be bred as a baby. They're going to fall in this hole and immediately be dispensed out here. Now, in a creative world, that's fine, because again, mob spawning off, these guys are perfectly safe. I can just leave them here. Now, in a survival world, they're probably going to get attacked by mobs, or mobs are going to spawn near them, or something's going to happen while you're not in the area. Happens quite often, at least in my survival world. maybe due to lack of forethought, but this is kind of an inefficient system when you're in a survival world. Now you'll also notice that this has a toggle switch, a manual toggle switch. When it's on, all of these components will work. When it is off, this monostable circuit will turn off, which cuts power to the entire system. Therefore, the dispenser won't fire, this piston won't fire, and this piston won't move the block in, and they will just fall into the lava and die. Now, this system is overcomplicated and, well, not too great. It does work exactly as intended, but what I didn't account for, I didn't know when I first made this that villagers can move themselves when they are in the minecart. So if a villager spawns and they choose to move backwards after hitting this powered rail and they do not fall off the gap, or there's a backup, a villager can push themselves back, hit this powered rail, and just like that, one of two things is going to happen. Either the minecart's going to fall into the lava with the villager and you're going to lose your minecart and your villager, or your minecart's going to get launched up, get stuck right here, break your dispensing system, and your villager is going to suffocate inside of this block. None of that is ideal. We don't want that to happen. So if you'll follow me all the way over here to my second design, the updated version of this, you will see first thing, this circuit is going to be much, much simpler. It's much easier to make, it's not resource heavy whatsoever. You will need some nether crystal, so it's not horribly easy to get nether crystal, but it may not be the first thing you're doing in the game. So the first thing that you'll notice is, one, the number of doors in my farm has changed, and the position is important, as well as I only have the 3 villagers. The 3 villagers in here and the 12 doors is important. It is imperative. I will explain why later when I get to entity cramming. Now, you'll notice my 12 doors are symmetric around this design so that the village center is within this farm and not somewhere off in the distance. That's also important. And you'll notice that I have 12 doors as a very specific number. I have 3 villagers. That is my preference. 1 farmer generally, and then 2 other villagers. It doesn't matter what they are. It can be a second farmer like I have in here. It won't cause any issues. They'll still breed like normal. Now, the reason I have 12 doors, each villager accounts for 3 doors. 3 doors account for 1 villager. So if these guys are registering these doors, when they perform their census every minute or so to check how many villagers are in the village, there's already 3 of them, but there are enough doors to support only 4 villagers. So they're going to try and breed a 4th villager, and then once there is a 4th villager that they can register, the census will register that there are 4 villagers in this village, and it will no longer let them produce any more villagers until this baby has fallen in the gap and left the area. Then they will again try to produce more villagers. Now the way that this census is going to work is every minute or so the villagers are going to look around and see how many villagers are counted in their village. Now you'll see that my collection unit is way down here. This is where my villagers are going to fall and where they're going to stay after they've been put through this system. Now this is like, I think 12 blocks deep. Now the census will count all villagers within the 32 radius horizontally, I believe, of the village. So along this flat plane all the way out to 32 blocks away, it's going to count any villager in that area in the census. However, it will also count, I believe, 6 blocks down and 6 blocks up. So as you can see, when my villager falls off this ledge and goes through the system, they're much farther than 6 blocks down, so any villager in here will not be counted in the census. They will not be counted as part of the village. However, here's where it gets complicated and why I have this set up in a very specific way. Now, when your villagers fall down in here, what's going to happen is your villager gets spawned in here. Now, your villager is inevitably going to spend a small amount of time in here, and they're likely going to get past carrots by this farmer as soon as they're bred to even out the distribution of food. Now, they'll get food, then they will fall in this hole down into the collection system. When more than 2 villagers who have food are in this collection system, they have the potential to breed. Now, they're not counted in the census when they are in this chamber. However, if a villager is still registering these doors and they notice that there's less than the maximum number of villages related to the doors, this would be if there are less than 4 villagers in the census, they'll continue to breed. But not only will they continue to breed, any villager within the 32 radius, both vertical and horizontal, in a spherical radius around the design from the center of the village, they will continue to breed as well. But if they breed in here, any villagers that they breed won't be counted in the census. So these villagers will breed, this fourth villager will be counted. Then the villager will fall down with food, and when more than one villager are in here, they have the potential to breed without being counted. That can break your system and cause entity cramming, which is why I've relied on the timing of the census, along with the timing of, I believe it is 5 minutes. It's an unofficial time, but it's believed to be 5 minutes for a villager spawning cooldown or a villager breeding cooldown. So it takes 5 minutes between villagers breeding to be ready to breed again, and it only takes about 1 minute for the census to be registered. Now, if there's 12 doors and only 4 villagers, then the way I'm relying on the timing for this to work and prevent entity cramming, along with my contingency system, which I will explain in a bit, there are 4 villagers in here, they won't want to produce. So a villager will inevitably spend about a minute or so in here at minimum before they walk away. They have 20 minutes before they become full-grown adults. Now, they will walk off, but they will spend enough time in here and then fall down so that when the census is performed, after they fall, they will already probably be ready to breed. If not, it will only take about 2 minutes, which reduces the risks of these guys trying to breed in the chamber, which will prevent entity cramming further. Now, that's probably very confusing. If anybody has any questions, please put it in the comments. I will try and explain it in a much simpler fashion. I am just rushing for the sake of time. Now, you'll also notice that in addition to the door changes, I've also placed these little lily pads on top of my water sources. But I've also placed a block over top of the lily pad. Now, you can use lily pads to protect your water source so that your villagers can't walk on top of them, but as you can see here, there are 2 options. If your water sources are on level with your crops, 1, your villagers can fall in here. It's not a great thing. It's not something that you want. You can use lily pads, but as you'll notice, if I'm walking around and I'm not flying, see that? This lily pad has a thickness to it, so when I step on the lily pad, you can see I raise up a bit. You don't want that because when your farmer or your villager walks off of this lily pad, they're going to technically jump and break your crops, and you do not want that to happen. And this is the issue we're trying to avoid. Now, lily pads look good, so I've used them, and as a further bonus, this is the other way you can do it. You can just directly cover your water source with a 2-high block so that none of your villagers can jump on top of this block and then jump off. I'd also recommend putting a ceiling so that your villagers can't jump while they are in here. Now obviously I have torches blocking it, but they wouldn't really jump there anyway. So I can't jump and I can't break this crop. Neither can your adult villagers. Now, if you do it this way, this leaves 1 less block for your baby villager to exit, which is why I prefer to use lily pads, because it still leaves this space open enough for the villager to get out of. So I prefer lily pads, but that's up to you. You'll also notice that here I have signs again instead of trapdoors, because if I were to place a trapdoor, I can actually catch on the side of the trapdoor, but for the signs, they don't really have any physical presence, so your villagers will just fall straight past, but the water will not, just as we want. Now, also, for lack of foresight, I didn't feel like changing it in my survival world, but I made a 12 by 12 cube, or rather square. Now, I would recommend doing this build out of an odd number of dimensions on each side, i.e. like 9 by 9 or 11 by 11. If you do an even number, the chamber below where these villagers are dropping into is going to have to be too high, because you're going to need to push them into a 1-block hole where the center is going to be 4 blocks. So as you can see, I have these 3 blocks which are part of the center. I have a raised water source, a raised water source, and a raised water source. But then where I have my hole, which is still in the center with these 4 blocks, but I've chosen this one as my drop point, you'll notice that I have a lowered water source. That is so that all of the water doesn't have any dead zones. There's nowhere for your villager to sit so that they won't be pushed by the water, and they won't really be able to fight back either. And they'll be pushed into this central hole, but no water will fall through because that will disrupt the next water source. Now, as you can see, when you come down here... as a side note, if you have done this out of an even number, You want to put torches in here because this will need to be too high so as not to disrupt this water flow, but because it's too high, mobs might be able to spawn in here. So just put a few torches, just as safe measure. Nobody wants a zombie to spawn in here and eat all your baby villagers. Now, just like before, they're going to drop down to this central collection unit and hit this tripwire. Now, you'll see I have a constant flowing water source back here, a few blocks back, just so that I don't have to extend this way, way forward. Now, this block is going to, the villagers will fall through, the water will push the villager into this chamber, and they will fall down. Now, initially, my first design had a toggle on and off switch so that none of these circuits would fire and they would just fall straight into the lava and die. This doesn't have a manual on and off switch per se, even though you could manually trigger it if you wanted to. I will explain the off switch in a second. However, you'll see currently this piston is activated by this torch. This torch is powering this block, which is toggling these torches to the opposite state. So if this torch is on, these two torches are off. If this torch is off, these two torches are on. I.e., if this torch is on and this piston is powered. So if this piston is powered, these two pistons are deactivated. If this piston is deactivated, these two pistons are activated. Now you'll see this has a red block, this has a blue block, that has a cobblestone block. Now currently, with this system activated, this piston has pushed this block into place, allowing 1, water to flow over, and 2, blocking off the kill chamber with the lava. You'll also see when I toggle this, what's going to happen is these two blocks are going to be pushed in. The blue block is going to cut off the water source. The red block is going to prevent my villagers from falling into this area with an arc to their fall, allowing them to escape the kill chamber. Now, as a quick note, this is my creative world where I was doing a test. Now, if this were my survival world and I'm pumping out specifically baby villagers, I would only want a 1 high chamber, which is why there's only 1 block. But in my creative world where I'm doing testing and experiments with this, I have this as a 2 high chamber because when I use a villager spawning egg, it more often than not will spawn an adult villager, not a baby. So that is why this is a 2 high chamber. In my survival world, this is only 1 high, and this block is sufficient to fully block this gap off so that they cannot fall in this area. Now, for demonstration purposes, I'm going to leave it as 2. That is not what I wanted to do. No, no, no. Okay, nothing's broken. But, as you can see, when this is off, the villagers will fall straight through, and they will just fall into this lava. Now, you'll notice this sign is here above the lava. Now, this sign is not making contact with the lava. It is 1 tile above the lava source. This is imperative. 1, your sign isn't going to burn, but 2, you'll notice that water sources take time to dissipate. So if I were to give myself a redstone torch really quick, and I were to reactivate the system, you'll notice that 1, water takes time to spread, but if I were to also block this water source, water takes time to dissipate. Now, if this sign isn't here, when these blocks switch at the same time and this block pulls out at the same time, the little bit of water remaining in this chamber is going to fall down and it's going to turn your lava source block into an obsidian block, which, if you're in a survival world, you're going to need a diamond pick and a lot of patience to get rid of. And then you're going to have to replace your lava source block. It's really annoying. If you put this sign here, it prevents that problem. Now, if for some reason you just really, really don't want to put this sign here, you're going to have to mess with the timing of these pistons, and it's going to have to complicate your circuit substantially. So just put the sign here, please. It's going to make it much nicer. Now, you can see when this circuit is on, the next thing, when they get pushed down this chamber by the water source, they'll fall. Now, this is important. This is a 1, 2, 3 block gap, and then they hit the blocks with the tripwire attached to them. Now, the reason for this is, as I discussed in my first video, you have an arc to your fall. When baby villagers are falling through this tube, you'll notice that if I'm walking around and I were to walk off and just let go, I've moved forward. I'm not down here right where I walked off. I'm over here. So the reason why this needs to be a minimum of 3 blocks of a drop before they hit the tripwire is so that the arc of their fall is stunted by the 4 walls of this chamber, so that when they fall, they won't get caught in this little part right here, and they won't sit here on this stand triggering your tripwire over and over and over again, completely breaking the system. You don't want that. So 3-block drop minimum, which minimizes the falling damage and keeps them from falling into this little section. And then after, clearly they hit the tripwire, and then 1, 2, 3, just so that when your villagers are standing here, they can't jump up and trigger your tripwire the same. So the 3 blocks on either side of the tripwire is very important. Now, you'll notice that this tripwire is going to power this dispenser. So I have this chest, and I would fill this chest up with non-stackable items. Now, when I say non-stackable, you'll notice these wooden hose. I've used wooden hose because, one, I can't stack these. They come in stacks of 1 and no more than 1, which is very important. Now, you'll also notice that I've chosen wooden hose because they're extremely cheap. You can make them in bulk from the beginning of the game, and it won't cost you hardly anything. Now, I will put 24 hose in this chest, which will feed into this hopper, which will feed into this dropper. This doesn't have to be a dispenser. It can be a dispenser or a dropper, but droppers are cheaper, so I'd recommend a dropper. Then this dropper will take the hose, and every time this tripwire is activated, every time that a villager falls down here and activates this tripwire, one of these wooden hose will be dropped into this chest. Now, as you can see, this chest is hooked up to a comparator. It is not in subtractive mode. It is just in its default mode. So this comparator is going to read the contents of this chest and give a redstone output signal. Now, the number of wooden hose in this chest and the number of ticks that it puts out is very important. Now, Minecraft has a very specific equation related to the number of spaces in a box that are actually filled, so the percentage of your chest which is actually filled, i.e. that would be different for a double chest as it has more slots. Now, it also counts the fullness of each stack inside, and it uses an equation to determine, using these like this small amount of info, to determine the amount of power output. Now you'll see, if I do this with a single chest, and I put, let's say, oh, I don't know, exactly 24 wooden hose in this chest. This is 9, 18, 20, no, sorry, 9, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. You'll notice it gives me a 13 tick output exactly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Now you'll notice it's admittedly hard to see because of the angle that I made this at, but bear with me. You'll notice that if you're paying attention to this last light right here, when I take one wooden hoe out of this chest, that light turns off. And when I put one wooden hoe back in, the light turns on. So 24 wooden hoes creates a 13 tick output from this comparator when it is reading the chest. Now you'll see from this comparator I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 ticks, and then it goes into this repeater. Now the reason is, it's a little difficult to make sure that this pathway up to this torch to toggle the circuit on and off automatically is going to be exactly 13 ticks. So all you need to do is make sure that it's 13 ticks until it reaches a repeater, and then you can use any number of repeaters you need to reach this part of the circuit depending on how you're building this. So that is optional, but this 13 tick output into a repeater is not. Again, 13 ticks from the comparator to this block, then it goes into the repeater. So you'll notice when I put exactly 24 hose into this chest, let's see, if I were to put 23 in this chest, power output reaches all the way to this point, does not power this block, does not power this repeater, i.e. the circuit is still activated, and this piston is still on while these two are off. If I were to put the 24th hoe in this chest, you'll notice this block has power, which is powering this repeater, which is going to toggle this torch off, these two pistons on, and it is going to turn my system off. It is going to, as soon as 24 villagers pass through this point, assuming that you've put the correct number of hose in the chests like you were supposed to, it will automatically toggle the system off. You will have 24 villagers in this chamber, and any further villagers, 25 and further villagers, will just fall straight into this lava and die. But your villagers will still produce baby villagers in the process. So, again, this comparator, when it has 24 wooden hose or non-stackable items in this chest, will toggle the system off. Now you'll notice this also extends this way. Now, part of my issue was with entity cramming. This was not originally a part of my circuit until I put it in my survival world, and I realized that, again, your villagers are capable of breeding inside of this chamber, which doesn't get accounted for by this tripwire. The tripwire will only count villagers that have bred up top and fallen down, triggering the tripwire. So you might have 24 villagers who were bred from above before the system shuts off, but you don't know if these villagers in here have bred any baby villagers that haven't been registered by this tripwire, which could go over 24, causing entity cramming and damaging most of your villagers to the point of near death and killing your others. Which is why, again, I have 3 villagers and 12 doors, and then this additional part of the system where you'll see it travels over out of this repeater, and as soon as this circuit shuts itself off for the 24th villager, you'll notice this torch tower gets activated, which activates these 3 pistons, which will shut off the skylight to this door, to these 3 doors, which will invalidate only these 3 doors. Now, this will shift your center of your village temporarily somewhere over here, I think would be the average between them, just by a guesstimation. But if these doors are invalidated, they're no longer counted as your village. But if they're not counted as your village, you have 3 villagers standing up here which are counted by the census. You also have 9 doors which corresponds to exactly 3 villagers. I.e., when these doors get activated, well, when these pistons get activated and invalidate this skylight, and invalidate these doors rather, no more villagers will be produced up top. And because the census says that all of these doors have corresponded to their respective number of villagers, i.e. there are 3 villagers and enough doors for only 3 villagers, these guys will stop breeding as well. Now again, in the meantime, before the system shuts off, the way that I've prevented entity cramming is by using the timing of this. Again, 4 villagers in this chamber, including your baby, no more villagers will be produced by these guys, and no more villagers down here will breed and produce extra baby villagers that aren't accounted for. And because of the timing of the census, along with the breeding cooldown, along with the amount of time that it typically takes for a baby villager to leave this area, no more extra villagers should be produced down in here. It's not impossible. The odds are just astronomically in your favor. Probability is in your favor. So, if it does break, I apologize. Simple fix though. You might have to have some weakened villagers that'll die in maybe 2 or 3 hits, so you'll have to deal with that, but it's not as if you can't use them. They will still be alive and healthy, they just won't be as healthy. Now, that being said, if when these doors are invalidated, if your villagers are already trying to breed before these doors are invalidated, they will continue to breed anyway. So this is not 100% foolproof, it's more like 97-ish%. So be warned. But continuing on, that is the collection system. This is the dispensing system, which is the railing system is not my idea. I will put a link down into the description to the mad genius that thought of this, because this is beautiful. This is a thing of beauty. Now, it needs to be said that it does in fact damage your villagers ever so slightly, which is why the damage from entity cramming matters so much. Normally, with entity cramming, maybe 1 or 2 of your villagers dies, but the rest of them take a small amount of damage, but you can export them, and no problem, really. In this instance, what's going to end up happening is your villagers are going to fall into this chamber, and then I'm going to push this button. This holds my minecarts. This is my hopper. This hopper leads into another hopper, which leads into this dispenser. Now, this has to be a dispenser. This one right here can be a dispenser or a dropper. It doesn't matter. But this one on top needs to be, well, this one can be a dispenser or a dropper, but this one down here has to specifically be a dispenser to work. Now, you'll see it has 3 powered rails which go up into this, and then powered rail which goes down, and then a drop. So when I press this button, minecarts dispense, and it makes it through the system to the other side. It'll only pick up 1 of my villagers. So if I were to put in a villager egg for demonstration purposes, my villager is inside. I will press my button. My villager is export. Now you see he also took fall damage just because I didn't continue this track. But what's going to happen is The second that this minecart reaches here, it's going to pick up this villager, but it is technically connected to this track. So it will spawn the minecart here, but because the minecart is wedged inside this block, your villager is temporarily going to take like 1 second's worth of suffocation damage before they get dispensed down. So it's a minor amount of damage. You can see he took fall damage and the damage from the dispenser, but I can sit here and punch him for a while and he's got plenty of health. It takes a lot of effort to kill him even after all of that, including the extra fall damage, which shouldn't really be accounted for. Now you'll notice I also have this little drop-off just so that they can't go back in. I also have this detector rail powering this powered rail, only temporarily, so that it only really works in the one direction. It doesn't work in the reverse direction. They can't launch themselves back up as easily. So if you come over here, this rail system isn't necessarily the most straightforward thing to build, but it's not hard. It's very resource cheap. Now you'll see if this is my little chamber where I'm holding my villagers. As you can see, it's just a replica of that little cage right there. This is the block that my villagers would be standing on. Now to make this, you're going to want to put your dispenser, power it however you wish, put your 3 powered rails, then you're going to want to use a lever to toggle on the powered rails. Then over here, if I were to get rails in my inventory real quick, you'll see, to get this to work, if the block that my villagers are going to be standing on is right here, what I'm going to want to do is temporarily delete this block from my powered rails. I would put a railing here, and then delete this rail, and then replace the block that my villagers would stand on. Like so. Now, I keep breaking things accidentally. As for the upper portion of the track, you're going to want to delete this first part. Then you're going to want to take your rail, and then your powered rail here, and then another little rail on top of this, then delete this rail, and then replace the side of your cage. Now this rail is also being powered just by another lever, just because it's the simplest way to power these rails. It's very easy. So that's all you need to do. Now you'll see over here, initially I had a detector rail in my original design, which would power a piston, which would go up and prevent your villagers from moving back across this, but sometimes they would get caught on top of the block. I could use 2 pistons and a moving track in order to get that to work, but it's much simpler to just stick to this drop-off. It works perfectly fine. So you'll see, for demonstration purposes, this little baby villager is in here. You wanna... No, other way. You're not gonna walk off, are you? Inconvenient. Anyway, so the baby villagers will spawn. They'll go into the system. Now, I'm going to use a spawning aid, which is going to spawn an adult villager, more than likely, but possibly a baby. It helps to put it in your inventory. So, the villager falls in. As you can see, the circuit is currently off. So he'll just fall and he'll die. And that's perfectly fine. That's what we expected to happen. Now if I were to take this hoe out of here, let's take 6. Okay. So let's put the hose back into circulation. So this will put 6 villagers before it turns itself off. Now currently, as you can see, the circuit is reactivated. So if I put 1 villager in here, he should be falling. He'll activate the tripwire. He'll fall in here. He can be a baby villager, and I'll just sit here and let him grow up with as many villagers as I need, and then when I want to take him out, I'll press the button and he'll get dispensed. Works perfectly fine. If I were to put a bunch of villagers in this system, let's just put them in here. You'll see my system has now turned itself off. Now I probably put too many in there too fast for the tripwire to recognize, which is why it took too many. It took more than 5 to trigger the system. But you'll see, they're all just going to stand in here. There's even a baby, and they'll all grow up, and when they're finally grown up and I'm ready to take them out of the system, I can just dispense them at will. They're not at risk of dying from mobs. They're not at risk of turning into zombies or anything. They're just safely in this little chamber until I choose at my own leisure to remove them. It's much more efficient and useful for a survival mode. Now you'll see, I can put any number of villagers now that the circuit is off, assuming that they actually go in the hole. And you'll see they'll all just fall straight into this chamber and die. Very simple. It's a resource cheap. It's very efficient. And I'll show you, just to show you that it's not just a creative mode thing. It doesn't only work in creative mode. I'll even go into my current survival mode where I've built this. Now, bear with me. This is my first survival world. Hold judgment till the end, please. It's not a finished base. I've only been working on it for about a week, maybe? 6 or 7 days, I think. So yeah, it is my cave base. It's my first cave base, and I'm currently building things. Uh-oh. How in the hell did that manage? My cows are in danger. Ugh, I do not want to deal with that. Anyway, my villager breeder is over here. Ignore this dirt path. I was just locating my villager farm, or my iron farm, which I'm building. It has to be 64 blocks away. So you can see my villagers, their farmer is passing crops, or at least attempting to pass crops, to my other villagers. They will currently breed. As you can see, my doors are all validated. These 3 doors back here are the ones that are tied to my circuit. So are you guys going to breed? Because that would be perfect. Do me a flavor. Hi, doggo. Alright, it doesn't look like these guys are going to breed just yet, but they should within like the next minute or so. You'll see here I have my maintenance path, which leads down to my villager area. So they would fall down. This is the chamber where they would initially fall into my water source block. Now you can't see it, and it's not color-coded like it was before, but all of my redstone is actually behind these walls. Now you can see this is my chest, my hopper, my dispenser, or my dropper rather, is back there. So just let me replace this block real quick. And you'll see this is where I would initially put all of my 24 hose. When I first activate the system, I put all 24 in here. They go into the dropper, dispenser, whatever. And after the villager falls through, you can see this is my collection unit. There is my tripwire. They fall down here. I currently have, let's see, 11. This is a row of 9, 10, 11. So I have 11 villagers currently in here. None of them have been breeding with each other in this chamber due to the timing of the census and the breeding cooldown, as well as the number of validated doors. You can see all of my hose that get used once they're dispensed by my system are to put into this chest. So I can just take them from this chest if I want to reset it, go upstairs, put them back in the other chest, and they'll go back into circulation. Now you can also see that this is where I would put my mine carts, if I had any. I died, I think, with my only other minecart. Let's see if one's in here, just for demonstration. Nope. So, if we go upstairs and get a minecart, which hopefully I have in my chest, my temporary storage. This isn't actually my finalized base, as you can see. So I have one minecart, and it's really sad. I have a bunch of iron, I just haven't made more because, well, I recently got this up and running, but it has been up and running for a while. You can see they've actually produced a little baby. And if he's going to do me any favors... Now, the biggest issue with this design, as a disclaimer, babies have a random occupation. They can be nitwits, they can be farmers, clerics, what have you. Now, if it spawns a baby farmer, that is probably the most dangerous thing that can happen. It's not a problem necessarily, but when your baby farmer is spawned, the first thing they're going to do is going to go pick up crops and try and distribute them using the socialization dynamic with the other villagers. That has the potential to keep him in here for a long time. Now you have 20 minutes before the baby villager turns into an adult, roughly 20 minutes. So it's not usually a problem. It never has been a problem for me before, but they will typically spend a lot of time in here. They'll stock up on carrots, and then they'll fall down into this breeder, which is where I would started becoming wary of the villagers breeding while in captivity. But you'll see, anyway, clearly this has worked. And currently none of these villagers will breed because that baby villager is still up top in the system being counted by the census. That is the wrong chest. You'll see if I put a minecart in here, it will get taken into a dropper, or a hopper rather, which is right here, and you can see my redstone on here, my little powered rails, and I can actually open up my dispenser. You'll see that's where my minecart has gone. Now when I press this button, It takes my villager and dispenses him safely as soon as I want him to and no sooner. This has been Badass Motor Prussia. Thanks for watching.